Hello, we're going to work today on how to use VLOOKUP to bring a couple of fields from one spreadsheet into another based off of a key field in a column. In this case, we've got here the destination, and then we have our data that we want to bring over to that. I'm going to go ahead and make this big so that we can actually see it. And there we go. Now they're about the same size. I'm doing it here in the same workbook, but in two sheets, because if we take a look at Excel, it doesn't really matter. If you take a look at Google Docs, it seems to matter. So if you're going to do this in Google Docs, do make sure that you've got the same workbook. If it's going to in another worksheet, in another file, then copy it into create a new sheet like this, cut and paste the data you want into here. We've already done that here, one way or the other. So we want to bring the forecast and the cost, why? Well, why not, into this other sheet. We'll start by just putting new headings on here, just because. I'm not going to worry about the formatting on that. I imagine you all can figure that out. And if not, there's Google. You can just look for it. So the first thing we want to do here is we need to look up the forecast in our table. So we've got the numbers we want over in this tab, in this sheet 2. So we're going to use our VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP. The first field in VLOOKUP, the VLOOKUP is a great tool, something to get really good and understanding about. But the first thing we're going to do, the first field here is, what are we trying to look up? What's the key that we're using to go get the data somewhere else? And in this case, it's over here in column A. It's the 4, but it's A2. We're going to copy this formula down to all 8 instances in this case, and then this number it'll be A2, A3, A4, and that's fine. Next, we want to know, well, what are we going to try to look this up? Where are we looking for the data in? What is the location of the data we're interested in? So that's over here in sheet 2. And we're going to, first we need to make sure that the first column in the range, because we're going to select a range here, the first column in the range is the key, has the key that we're looking for. So it must be SKU. If we had these reversed, if forecast, for example, was column A and SKU was column B, we'd have to reverse those. But in this case, they're in the order we want. So we can start. There's a couple different ways to do this. I like to keep it simple by just doing the full range. And so column A, and then the column we want here is B. So we'll go ahead and just select those two. Now we've got a range here. You can see sheet 2 exclamation, which just means we're on the sheet here as opposed to our other place. And we start in column A and go to column B, and it's the entire column. There's no row indicated here. That's good enough. Now we could do a comma, and now we need to say, what do we want to return? So we want to look up based off of this first column, but we want to return the corresponding value in this second column. And that's based off this range. If we had started in column B and went to column C, it would still be the second column. So here we want 2. We want the second column here. And then, because we want only exact matches, we're going to type in false. Now, in Excel here, you can see it says true approximate match, false exact match. In Google Docs, I believe it says sorted, yes or no, which is misleading because that's not really what it tells you. False here is what you want in either case. Yep, I did type it right. And then you can go ahead and press enter, and it brings you back to the original one. And hopefully, if we go manually check, 4 does have a forecast of 670, so that worked well. So now we can go ahead and we can just copy this on down. We could do this later, but I just want to get this done. And if we just spot check a couple, let's say 2 is 228, 2 is 28, we know it's working. You can see here that the key that we're looking for does change as we go down the roads. We want A5, we've got A5 is the field we're looking up. However, we do have the same range because we didn't put any row in that, and we're always looking for the second one to return. So that's good. So now the cost, we do really the same kind of thing. We do a VLOOKUP, no difference here. I can't type, but that's okay. I suppose I could just do that, but that would be way too easy. Comma, and that was a tab I pressed, by the way. And now we do the same thing. We're going to come back over here, and we want to make sure that we select our key column is the first one, and then over to the right somewhere is the data we're interested in. It does not matter that we have some data we don't want in the middle. In fact, we could even go all the way over to column F and just make a really large range here. We could say we want to select column A through F. That doesn't matter as long as somewhere in this range it starts with the key, and then somewhere in that range we have the column of the data we're interested in this case the column C. So we're going to go A, and we'll just go to column D just because we can. I'm holding down Shift to make sure it's a complete selection. And then we do comma, and now, as before, we said 2 to return the forecast because it's the 1, 2 in our range. Now we're going to do 3 because it's the 1, 2, 3 in our range. 3. And then, as I said before, false because we want to do an exact match. There are times where you want to do a non-exact match. Not going to talk about that here. Here we want to do an exact match, and we'll press enter, and there we go. Hopefully, that item is 1 in 18, and it sure enough is. Again, we'll come over here, and we will copy on down to the end here. Now, if we, in our sheet here, instead had, let's say we put something else in column A, Excel and most spreadsheets, I think all of them at this point are smart enough to say, okay, my thing just shifted and went from A, instead of going from A to D, it's now B to E. But you'll notice that the index is still 3. It is still the third column in the selection that we asked for. It has nothing to do with what the column itself actually is, whether it's actually column C or actually column D or so on. One more thing I want to show, because we're basically done here, but I do want to show one more thing. What happens if it doesn't exist? And this is where that false really matters. Let's say, for example, I had keyed in item code 2.2. Why? Because. You'll see here it says NA, which means I don't know, I couldn't find it. Don't know what happened. You generally don't want to do this, but if that was the case, and that's actually good in this case, because I don't want to know what that is, because there's some kind of an error there. So in this case, I want the NA. If we had done true, then it's going to say, well, I'm going to go find something that's close, I think. And in this case, if we go look, we'll see that it's close to 2, which, okay, maybe in that case it's fine. But if I had keyed in 20, we're going to get 504, which is, I don't know what 504 is. 504 is, oh, the last one, because 10 is the last one on here, which would make sense. But 20 isn't on the list. So we don't want that. We want to say, look, we don't have it. The source data that we're trying to look up isn't in there. Maybe there's some kind of typo. So that's a good thing to see. So that's why the false is really important here. One of the reasons, a couple of different reasons. That's one of them. Last thing I'll call out here, I think I said last one was the last thing, but we'll say this is the last thing. The sequence of this does not matter. I've got it here in the correct sequence, in numeric sequence. But if I put in a few different things here, let's say 50 and then 20 and then 40, those certainly aren't in sequence. And I'll just do 1, 2, 3, and 7, 8, 9, just because. If I now look up item 20 over here, I've got 2 and I've got 8. So item 20, I do have a 2 and an 8, and it found it even though it's not in a sequence. If I did say, we'll just go through this again, if I did say that it was true, now it's assuming my data is sorted, and it's going to give me that last one it found right before. So it's like, okay, it's greater than 10. Oh, it's more than 50. It's less than 50. So it will go with the 10. And that's not what we want. We want the true. So in these cases, we want true. Sometimes you do want the one right before it that was close. In this case, we don't. That's all for now. Thank you very much.